All right, so we are starting today with the story of Narasingha Avatar. Last week we went through the childhood of Prahlada and his persecution by his father Hiranyakashipu, his teachings to the other Asura boys, and so on. So we are starting now with Shrimad Bhagavata Mahapurana, Book 7, Discourse 8. Lord Narasingha extolled on the death of the demon king. Narada resumed, since it's Narada who's narrating this story. So what just happened before this is Prahlada's gave his teachings to the other Asuras' children who were at his Gurukula. On hearing his exhortation, all the Daitya's sons forthwith accepted it because of its faultlessness, but not the teaching of their guru. Alarmed, their guru being the two sons of Shukra, who are substituting for Shukra, who is absent. Alarmed to perceive their mind intent on a single purpose, specifically a single purpose other than what they wanted to be, the guru's son thereupon quickly and correctly reported the matter to the king. Hearing of that unwelcome misdemeanor on the part of his son, which was hard to bear, Hiranyakashipu made up his mind to dispose of his son, his limbs shaking under the impulse of anger. Reproaching in a harsh language Prahlada, who was not only disciplined, but was bent low with modesty and standing with joined palms, and was undeserving of such treatment, and regarding him with a wicked and crooked eye, the demon, who was cruel by nature, spoke, hissing like a serpent struck with the foot. O unruly, stupid wretch, causing discord in our family, I shall dispatch you this day to Yamaloka, you who have grown obstinate and have slipped away from my authority. By whose might, O fool, have you violated like an undaunted person the authority of one myself, before whom, when angry, the three worlds and their guardians shake? Prahlada replied, he is unquestionably the strength not only of mine, but yours as well, O king, nay, of other powerful beings. It is he by whom all these, high and low, animate and inanimate, commencing from the Creator, have been held under sway. He is the ruler, he the mighty Kala, and the embodiment of organic and mental powers, physical strength and fortitude. The supreme controller of the three gunas, it is he alone who creates, protects, and devours the universe by means of his potencies. Abandon you this demoniac disposition of yours and keep your mind equipoised. There are no enemies other than an unsubdued and errant mind. For that constitutes the eminent and correct procedure of worshiping the infinite. That meaning maintaining the poise of the mind. Some regard the four quarters, the four intermediate points, the sky overhead and the subterranean regions below, as conquered by themselves, without having first curbed the six marauding thieves, which are the five senses and the mind. Whence can there be enemies, born of one's own ignorance, in the eye of the knowing and pious soul who has conquered his mind, and is alike to all embodied beings? Or rather, to whom all embodied beings are alike. Hiranyakashipu replied, evidently you are keen to die now that you are bragging too much, for the words of those who are anxious to die, O slow-witted one, are sure to be incoherent. Where is that Lord of the universe other than me that has been mentioned by you, O wretched one? If it is urged that he is everywhere, wherefore is he not seen in the pillar? Presumably pointing to a pillar. I, being all in all, here do I sever your head from your trunk, braggart that you are. Let Hari, who is the asylum sought for by you, protect you today. Thus tormenting again and again his son, that eminent devotee of the Lord, with abusive words and anger, the great and mighty demon sprang from his exalted seat, taking his sword and knocked the pillar with his fist. That very moment, there rose in that pillar a most terrific crash, as a result of which the shell of the cosmic egg cracked, and on hearing which, as it reached the spheres of the Creator and others, they, for their part, actually suspected the dissolution of their very abodes. Oh dear Yudhishthira, since it's the context of this story is Narada is relating it to Yudhishthira at Yudhishthira's Rajasuya Yajna. Displaying his valor and his anxiety to get rid of his son, he heard that unprecedented and weird sound, but he did not descry inside the court the source of that sound, due to which the leaders of the Asuras had got frightened. In order to substantiate the utterance of his servant in his presence in all objects, the Lord appeared in the pillar of the court, assuming a queer form, which was neither of a beast nor of a human being. Thus, looking intently on all sides, Hiranyakashipu beheld a being issuing forthwith from the interior of the pillar, and said to himself, or thought to himself, "He is neither a beast nor a human being. Oh, what may be this strange creature bearing the form of a man-lion?" Before Hiranyakashipu, who was musing on that most terrible figure, visibly stood the Lord in the form of a man-lion. It had fierce eyes shining as molten gold, and a face swollen or puffed with its dazzling hair and mane. It had fearful teeth and a tongue waving like a sword and sharp as the blade of a razor, and looked frightful because of its frowning aspect. It had erect and motionless ears, and a gaping mouth and nostrils amazing as a mountain cave, and excited terror with the parting of its jaws. The body touched the skies, and it had a short, thick neck, a broad chest, and a slender waist. It was covered all over with hair white as moonbeams, was endowed with multitudes of arms extending on all sides, and had claws that served as weapons. Hard to approach, it had driven away the Daityas and the Danavas with all its own and other choicest weapons, meaning that a whole fight ensued. And all the other demons in Hiranyakashipu's court either died or fled. Surely enough, this is an expedient thought out for my death by Hari, who is adept in many a conjuring trick, Hiranyakashipu was thinking. But what can be done by him, though fully prepared? Thus murmuring and arming himself with a mace, the elephant among the Daityas, Hiranyakashipu, rushed towards Narasingha, the Lord in the form of a man-lion. Narasingha literally means man-lion, Nara for man, Singha for lion. Fallen into the nimbus of Lord Narasingha at that time, the said demon vanished like a moth fallen into a flame. Indeed, it was no wonder that the demon, who was darkness personified, should have disappeared into that embodiment of Sattva, who had of yore actually swallowed up the darkness by his own effulgence. Then coming near, the mighty demon angrily assailed Narasingha with his mace of tremendous force. Narasingha seized him even as he paced forward, mace in hand, just as Garuda would catch hold of a huge serpent. At that time, the demon slipped from his hand, even as a serpent would from the clutches of Garuda sporting with it. The divinities, including the guardians of all the spheres whose abodes had been usurped by Hiranyakashipu and who stood behind a curtain of clouds, O scion of Bharata, regarded this as something not good, that Narasingha caught hold of Hiranyakashipu, but Hiranyakashipu was able to slip and break his grasp. Believing Lord Narasingha, from whose hand he had escaped, to be afraid of his own prowess, the great Asura, who knew no fatigue in battle, encountered him with vehemence, tightly grasping his sword and buckle. Buckle meaning buckler, a type of shield. Giving forth a shrill peal of laughter, rendered terrific by a roar, Sri Hari, who was possessed of extraordinary impetuosity, seized the demon, who was darting up and down with the swiftness of a hawk, brandishing his sword in many ways so as to leave no weak point, but whose eyes had closed partly, due to both Narasingha's brilliant glow, which is painful to Hiranyakashipu's eyes, and also he's kind of blinking, like flinching from Narasingha's roaring laughter. Throwing down at the entrance of the hall on his thighs the demon, who was impatient at having been caught and was wriggling all over, and whose skin had remained unscratched even by Indra's thunderbolt, as a serpent would knock down a rat, Lord Narasingha tore him with his claws in sport, even as the king of birds would tear a most venomous snake. Licking with his tongue the corners of his gaping mouth, the Lord, whose frightful eyes were difficult to gaze at due to fury, and whose manes and countenance had turned reddish, stained as they were with drops of blood, and who wore a garland of the demon's entrails, shone as a lion would by having killed an elephant. Casting off the demon, whose lotus heart had been split open by his pointed claws, the Lord, endowed as he was with a multitude of stout arms, slew with his nails, weapons, and heels Hiranyakashipu's bodyguards that had followed him on every side in thousands with uplifted arms. Shaken by his hair, clouds began to scatter away, and the planets were robbed of their luster by his glances. Tossed by his breath, the oceans grew turbulent, and frightened by his roar, the elephants guarding the quarters trumpeted. The firmament was overcrowded with aerial vimanas thrown up from below by his hair, and sore pressed by his feet, the earth was shaken from its foundations. Mountains flew as a result of his rapid movements, while the sky and the quarters were eclipsed by his splendor. Nobody dared approach the almighty Lord, who had then taken his seat on the excellent royal throne in the court of Hiranyakashipu, and had collected his brilliance, who was still furious, even though no adversary was visible, and who wore a most dreadful countenance. So it hasn't yet been spelled out, but the way that Hiranyakashipu was able to kill, the way that Narasingha was able to kill Hiranyakashipu while still honoring the boons of Brahma was he killed him neither at day or night, but at twilight, neither indoors nor outdoors, but laid across the threshold of both, neither in the air nor on the ground, but in his own lap, and neither with bare hand nor with weapons, but with claws, and neither by a human nor a beast, but a mix of the two. So he hit all the loopholes of Hiranyakashipu's boons. Hearing that the celebrated first and foremost son of Diti, the headache of the three worlds, had been killed in combat by Lord Srihari, the celestial women, whose faces were blooming with an outburst of joy, sent down showers of flowers upon him again and again. At that time, the sky was crammed with rows of aerial vimanas of heavenly beings eager to have a look. The tabors and drums of the gods were then sounded, while the foremost of the Gandharvas sang, and their wives danced. Resorting to the court of Hiranyakashipu, gods like Brahma the creator, Indra the ruler of the Devas, and Lord Shiva who lives on Mount Kailasa, Rishis, Pitris, Siddhas, Vidyadharas, mighty Nagas, the Manus, Prajapatis, Gandharvas, Apsaras, and Charanas, the Yakshas of Kubera, Kimpurushas, Vetalas, and accomplished Kinnaras, as well as all those attendants of Lord Vishnu, such as Sunanda and Kumuda, severally hymned Lord Narasingha of dazzling splendor seated there, with the hollows of their palms joined together on the head, meaning like pranaming with both hands up on top of their head, and remaining at a short distance from him, O dear one. Brahma said, I bow down to please the infinite Lord of wonderful prowess and holy deeds, whose potency is hard to fathom, who duly carries on by way of his sport through the gunas, the creation, preservation, and dissolution of the universe, and is undecaying by nature. Sri Rudra said, the end of a kalpa is the time for your anger. This puny demon has been slain. He's basically telling him to calm himself and not continue to destroy the entire universe, because he can see that Narasingha's wrath is still volatile. Protect his son, a devotee of yours who has approached you, O lover of devotees. Indra said, it is your own shares that have been recovered by you, O Supreme Lord, while protecting us. The shares in the yajna, he means, since Hiranyakashipu had ordered that no yajnas be performed except in which everything is offered to him. The lotus of our heart, which is your abode, and which had till now been possessed by this demon, has been opened by you. Oh, of what account is this which is going to be devoured by time in the eyes of those who are eager to serve you? Even moksha is not thought much of by them, O Lord Narasingha. Of what use are other objects? The rishis said, by this body assumed for the sake of protection, O guardian of those needing shelter. You have once more countenanced this day that supreme austerity which you enjoined upon us, which is your own glory, and by which, O most ancient person, you evolved all this that lay merged in you, and which had been stopped by this fellow, referring to, again, Hiranyakashipu. The Pitris said, this fellow forcibly appropriated and enjoyed the reverential offerings given by our sons, and even drank the water with sesame seeds offered by them at the time of bath in sacred waters. Hail to that Lord Narasingha, the protector of all righteousness, who recovered these offerings from his abdomen, the omentum of which was split open by his claws, meaning from Hiranyakashipu's abdomen, since Hiranyakashipu had given orders that even Pitri Shraddha be ceased, that no offerings of any kind be made to any being except to him. The Siddhas said, you tore with your claws this demon, proud of his numerous achievements, and who, impious as he was, snatched by dint of yogic breath control and asceticism, our mystic siddhis acquired through concentration of mind. To you as such we reverently bow, O Narasingha. The Vidyadharas said, proud of his bodily strength and valor, this fool banned our art, cultivated through concentration of mind on diverse objects. We ever bow low to the Lord, appearing in the form of a man-lion by way of sport, by whom the fellow has been killed in an encounter, even as a beast. The Nagas said, our salutation be to you, O Lord, who have afforded delight to our wives, by splitting open the breast of this wicked fellow by whom they had been abducted and our jewels wrested. The Manus said, we are Manus, disposed to do your bidding. The bounds of morality fixed by whom were set at naught, O God of gods, by this demon. That wicked fellow has been made short work of by you, O Lord. What can we do for you? Instruct your servants. The Prajapatis said, we are Prajapatis, evolved by you, O supreme ruler. This fellow, prohibited by whom we procreate no more progeny, surely lies with his bosom split open by you. Your descent, O embodiment of Sattva, is conducive to the good of the world. The Gandharvas said, we, O Almighty Lord, are your dancers and singers in dramatic performances. This fellow, by whom we were brought into subjection by dint of valor, physical strength, and organic power, has been reduced to this plight by you. Can one who has taken to evil ways attain happiness? The Charanas said, we have taken shelter under your lotus feet, which rid one of transmigration, now that this demon, a thorn in the heart of pious souls, has been disposed of by you. The Yakshas said, we who are well known as the chief among your servants, by virtue of our agreeable actions, had hitherto been reduced to the position of mere palanquin bearers by Diti's son. He, however, has been put to death by you, O Narasingha, the controller of the 24 categories, knowing as you did the agony caused to the people by him. The Kimpurushas said, we are Kimpurushas, while you are the Almighty Supreme Person. This wretched fellow was no more when he was reproached by pious souls. The Vaitalikas said, celebrating as we did your untarnished glory in assemblies and sacrificial sessions, we used to receive great honors. This extremely wicked fellow who had stopped it has luckily been got rid of by you, O Lord, even like a malady. The Kinnaras said, we hosts of Kinnaras, your servants, O Master, were constantly made to do unpaid labor by this son of Diti. That wicked fellow, O Hari, has been slain by you. Make for our prosperity, O Lord Narasingha. The attendants of Lord Vishnu said, it is but today that this weird form of yours, half lion, half man, which is a source of happiness to all the world, has been beheld by us, O Lord affording protection. This demon was your servant, cursed by the Brahmanas. We know this death of his as an instrument of your grace. Of course, it is the attendants of Lord Vishnu and not most of the other beings here who know that, who know the secret of the soul of Hiranyakashipu. Thus ends the 8th discourse, entitled Lord Narasingha Extolled on the Death of Hiranyakashipu, forming part of the narrative of Prahrada in Book 7 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 9, a eulogy of the Lord. I'll just mention, I mentioned this last time, but I'll just mention again as a reminder. The name of Prahlada or Prahrada, it's in many of the ancient Sanskrit manuscripts from India, it's difficult to read whether the name is Prahlada with a la or Prahrada with a ra, because the conjunct of the letter ha with the la or the ra can look very similar in the handwriting. So modern translations usually just pick one or the other. Prahlada with a la has become more popular, but this translation mostly uses Prahrada with a ra. But it's just different forms of the same name. Narada resumed. Thus all the gods and other beings, led by the creator and Rudra, dared not go near him, possessed as he was by anger and most difficult to approach. So they're all kind of reminding him of who they are and that they are his servants and that he's supposed to be their protector out of devotion, but also kind of half out of fear, reminding him how it's supposed to be and that he shouldn't kill them all. Sri, the Lord's own consort, the goddess Lakshmi, was personally sent by the gods, figuring that if anyone could appease him, she could. Perceiving that great wonder and full of misgiving, even she dared not go near, the form having neither been seen nor heard of before. Brahma then sent Prahrada, standing close by, with the words, "Approach, dear one, and pacify the Lord, who has waxed angry at your father." Uttering the words, "So be it," and slowly drawing near, even he is slow, O king, the great child devotee bowed down with his body on the ground and his palms joined together. Overwhelmed with compassion on seeing the infant fallen at the soles of his feet, and lifting it, the Lord placed on its head his lotus hand, which has brought security to those whose mind is terribly afraid of the serpent of time. Also keep in mind that his hand is still besmeared with the gore and blood of Prahlad's father, so it's a rather grisly gesture to put it on his head. All evil having been wiped out by the touch of his hand, and direct knowledge of the Supreme Spirit instantly revealed to him, Prahlada felt gratified, and with the hair of his body standing on end, his heart moistened and tears in his eyes, he installed the Lord's lotus feet in his heart. Perfectly composed, he extolled Sri Hari with a concentrated mind, and in a voice choked with emotion, his heart and eyes fixed on him. Prahlada said, "Hosts of gods headed by Brahma, contemplative souls and wise men too, whose mind is solely devoted to virtue, knowledge, and asceticism, have not succeeded even to this day in propitiating Sri Hari through streams of prayers abounding in many qualities. Can he be pleased with me, born of a ferocious race? Wealth, pedigree, comeliness of form, asceticism, learning, keenness of the senses, splendor, glory, bodily strength, self-endeavor, intelligence, and yoga, I believe, are not sufficient for the propitiation of the Supreme Person. For the Lord was pleased with the leader of a herd of elephants through devotion. I account a pariah," the word used is a chandala, "who has dedicated his mind, speech, actions, wealth, and life to him, far worthier than a Brahmana that has turned away his face from the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu, who has a lotus sprung from his navel, though endowed with the 12 attributes of a Brahmana. For the former, the Chandala, who is a devotee, redeems his race, but not the Brahmana, full of inordinate pride. This all-merciful Lord, who is sated with the realization of his own nature, does not covet honor at the hands of his ignorant devotee for his own sake. For whatever honor the devotee offers to the Almighty Lord rebounds upon himself, as the decoration of one's face is reflected on its image in a mirror." So this is a somewhat obscure metaphor, but what he's saying is that the only way to decorate a reflection is to decorate that which it is a reflection of. Thus, the only way to endow yourself directly with spiritual glory is to offer it to the Lord, and since you are merely a reflection of the Lord, and by giving it to the Lord, it's reflected onto you, which is the purpose of worship. It's not as though the Lord needs worship. That's the point that Prahlada is making. Therefore, with my fear completely gone, I celebrate with all my being and to the best of my understanding the greatness of the Almighty Lord, by which, when praised, even a mean fellow who has fallen into mundane existence by force of avidya is undoubtedly purified. Indeed, all these, the Creator and others, are your devotees, although they are afraid of you, the embodiment of sattva, but not like us, O Lord. He's saying, like us, asuras, who tend to look upon Vishnu as an enemy. The sport of the Almighty Lord through delightful descents or delightful avataranas is conducive to the well-being and prosperity of this world as well as to final moksha. Therefore be pleased to hold your anger now that the demon has been slain by you. Even a holy man rejoices over the destruction of a scorpion or a snake. Nay, all the worlds, relieved as they are, await the withdrawal of your anger. People will recall this form of yours, O Narasingha, for being rid of fear. I am not afraid, O invincible Lord, of your form with a most frightful countenance and tongue, eyes like the sun, an overbearing frown and fierce teeth, manes crimsoned with blood, ears erect as wedges, and claws that tear the enemy, the form which is adorned with a garland of intestines, and whose roar terrifies the very elephants guarding the four quarters. I am afraid, O lover of the miserable, of the formidable and terrible suffering involved in the cycle of transmigration, bound as I am with actions of my own, and thrown in the midst of devouring demons, O most shining one. Pleased with me, when will you call me to the soles of your feet, the abode of final moksha? Since, O infinite Lord, I have been wandering through all wombs, identifying myself with the body and other material sheaths, and scorched with the fire of grief born of separation from one's beloved objects, and being placed in unpleasant situations. And since that too, which is regarded as a cure for misery, entails suffering, in other words, since most of the things that worldly people recommend as a way to get out of suffering just will lead you into more suffering, they're not permanent solutions, is what he's saying there. Tell me the method of serving you. Thus instructed and enjoying the fellowship of enlightened souls that have taken shelter in your feet, and completely and finally rid of attachment and other evils, I shall easily tide over obstacles, constantly repeating, O Narasingha, the stories sung by the Creator himself, of the sports of my beloved friend and the supreme deity in you. The parents are no protectors to a child in this world, O Narasingha. A medicine is no remedy for an ailing person, and a vessel is no protection to a person drowning in the ocean. Inasmuch as all of these things are fallible, parents cannot protect their child from all suffering, and so on. Whatever is approved of here as an easy cure against some evil for an afflicted person proves effective only for the time being, O Lord, in the case of embodied beings neglected by you. Whatever being, high or low and possessing a distinctive nature, produces or transforms a thing, wherever, from whatever motive, whenever, with whatever instrument, from whatever source, and howsoever he does it, whatever he produces or transforms, whosoever the thing is, and by whomsoever he is prompted, all that is you. Maya, with her attributes, thrown into activity by Kala, representing the creative will of the cosmic being, evolves this subtle body, which is a product of karma, is exceedingly powerful and full of latent desires, and constitutes the wheel of transmigration with 16 spokes, provided by nescience. Who that is averse to you can cross over this wheel, O birthless one? Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Dr. Nishan. All right. Yeah, it was my birthday on Friday, so yeah, thanks for coming. Fine if you have to leave early. As such, you, who have by your own energy ever kept under full control the properties of intellect, nay, who as Kala have exercised full sway over the powers of both the effects and the causes, may draw me, O omnipotent Lord, close to you, me who have been thrown by nescience into this wheel of 16 spokes and am being crushed thereby, and who have sought your protection. The long life, riches, and glory in heaven of all the guardians of the worlds, which these people crave for, and which were swept away by a mere play of my father's eyebrows, knit in the course of an angry laugh, have been seen by me. But he has been disposed of by you. Therefore, I do not covet those blessings sought for by embodied beings, long life, wealth, glory, and sensuous pleasures, including those enjoyed by the Creator. Not even mystic powers, crushed by you in the form of the mighty Kala, knowing as I do their real worth, which is temporary. Place me by the side of your servants. How insubstantial are the enjoyments which are pleasant to hear of and are of the nature of a mirage. And on the other hand, how frail is this body, the hotbed of diseases. Though knowing this, people do not feel disgusted with them, busy as they are quenching the fire of desire with drops of honey, difficult to procure. How undeserving of compassion, O Lord, am I, a creature of Rajas, born in this race of Asuras, characterized by an excess of Tamoguna. And how unsparing is your mercy, prompted by which you have placed on my head as a token of favor your lotus hand, placed neither on Brahma's nor on Shiva's, nor again on Lakshmi's head. In other words, that those people are all here in this court, Brahma and Shiva and Lakshmi, and yet it was on Prahlada first that Narasingha placed his hand. Surely such a notion of superiority and inferiority as that found in a worldly creature could not exist in you, the friend, nay, the very self of the universe. Yet your grace, like that of a celestial tree, could be secured only through devoted service, and the fruit varies according to the service rendered by them, superiority or inferiority of the devotee in terms of comparing between person to person, having nothing to do with it. Indeed, how can I give up the service of your servants, the self-same I who was, O Lord, favored by the Devarishi after being accepted as his own in this way, while I was about to fall headlong through excessive fondness into the well of metempsychosis, inhabited by a python, meaning death, following the example of people hankering after the pleasures of sense and fallen into it. The act of rescuing of my life, as well as the slaughter of my father, was done by you, O immortal Lord, in order to vindicate the words of the sages, your devotees, when taking up his sword, my father, who sought to do violence, said, "If there is any God other than me, let him save you. I now sever your head." Indeed, you alone constitute this universe, since it is you who exist apart at its beginning, as well as at its end, and at the middle. Having evolved by your Maya this cosmos, and forthwith entered it, you appear as many forthwith entered into it, you appear as many through these gunas. This universe, constituting of causes and effects, O Lord, is as a matter of fact the same as you, while you are different from it. In other words, that the universe is part of the Lord, but the Lord is more than just the universe. Because it is so, the notion that he is one's own and he is another is indeed meaningless and illusory. A thing is actually the same as that from which it originates and comes to light, in which it lives and into which it gets dissolved, just as a tree is essentially the same thing as its seed, and a seed is identical with the earth. Withdrawing this cosmos into yourself by yourself, you repose in the deluge water, enjoying the bliss which is your very nature, and devoid of activity. Having closed your eyes through yoga and set aside sleep by self-illumination, and existing in your absolute nature, you cognize neither tamas nor the objects of senses. This cosmos is an embodiment of that very Lord in you, who spurred into activity by your own energy in the shape of the time spirit, the modes of prakriti. From your navel, as you reposed in water on the bed of Ananta, and when your trance came to an end, sprang up like a banyan tree from a tiny seed, a huge lotus that had lain hidden in you. Sprung from that lotus, Brahma, the first rishi, who failed to perceive anything other than that, and thought you, the seed, though pervading himself to be outside his body, could not discover you, although he kept diving into the water for 100 celestial years. Oh, how on a sprout having shot forth could one get at the seed? Utterly amazed and perched on the lotus, the self-born, whose heart had been thoroughly purified in course of time through intense meditation, eventually discovered you, O Lord, in a most subtle form as pervading his own being, constituting of the elements, the indriyas, and the inner sense, even as a yogi would perceive the most subtle odor pervading the earth. The Creator experienced joy on seeing the Lord, and in the same way on beholding the Supreme Person, a manifestation of his own Maya, endowed with innumerable faces, feet, heads, hands, thighs, noses, mouths, ears, eyes, ornaments, and weapons, the disposition of whose limbs was symbolized by this universe. Assuming the form of Lord Hayagriva with the horse's head, and having slain the two mighty enemies of the Veda, Madhu and Kaitabha by name, the embodiment of Rajas and Tamas respectively, you restored to Brahma the Vedic texts. They declare Sattva to be your most beloved body. In this way, you protect the worlds and destroy the enemies of creation through your avataranas in the form of human beings, beasts, rishis, devas, and the fish, and maintain virtue prevalent in the various yugas, the Supreme Person. Because you remain hidden in the Kali Yuga, hence you as such are called Triyuga, meaning the Lord who is known in the three yugas, and much less known in the Kali Yuga. This mind, O Lord of Vaikunta, does not find sufficient delight in your stories, vitiated as it is by sins, grossly wicked, morbid due to lust, and afflicted with joy and grief, fear and craving. With such a mind, how can I, a wretched creature, contemplate on your essential nature? Not fully gratified, the palate pulls me, O immortal Lord, in one direction. The generative organ drags me in another direction. The tactile sense, the stomach, and the sense of hearing pull me in other directions. The olfactory sense drags me in a quite different direction, while the eyes, which are restless, and the faculties of action pull me in yet other directions. All these tear me, as a number of co-wives wrench a householder. Perceiving these foolish creatures fallen thus in consequence of their own actions into the Vaitarani of metempsychosis, and exceedingly afraid of birth, death, and suffering proceeding from one to another, and making friendship with the bodies of their own people and enmity with the bodies of others, protect them this very day, feeling compassion for them, O Lord, staying on the other side of that river. So Vaitarani, in this river, Vaitarani is the name of a river marking the boundary of the realm of departed spirits, presided over by Yama, the river of death, much like the Greek river Styx. Vaitarani is the Sanskrit name. It is described as rushing with great impetuosity and being hot, fetid, and filled with blood, hair, and bones, etc. So that was what he was referencing, the Vaitarani of metempsychosis. Oh, what exertion can there be, O Lord, the teacher of all, in this work of lifting up these people to you, who are responsible for the birth, existence, and dissolution of this universe? Indeed, it is on the ignorant that the grace of the exalted ought to descend, O befriender of the afflicted. Such grace will be superfluous to us who are busy serving your beloved devotees. I am not at all afraid, O Supreme, of the Vaitarani, which is difficult to cross, my mind being immersed in the songs of your prowess, which are like an extraordinary nectar. I lament those deluded persons whose mind is turned away from such nectar, and who are carrying the burden of maintaining their family, etc., for the illusory delight proceeding from the objects of senses. Ascetics desirous of their own liberation, O Lord, generally practice silent meditation in solitude. They are not devoted to the interest of others. I do not long to be liberated alone, leaving behind these miserable creatures. I find no haven of rest other than you for these people wandering in the forest of transmigration. That which goes by the name of pleasures enjoyed by a householder, such as copulation, is trivial, for it results in suffering after suffering, akin to that caused by the scratching of one hand with another. Though undergoing a lot of trouble, the wretched people do not feel sated with these pleasures. Some wise man is able to curb passion like the itching sensation. A vow of silence, fasting, the hearing of scriptures, asceticism, the study of sacred books, discharging one's sacred obligations, exposition of the scriptures, living in seclusion, the muttering of prayers and concentration of mind, conducive as they are to final moksha, O inner controller, generally only prove to be the means of livelihood of those who have not been able to conquer their senses, whereas they may or may not be so in the case of hypocrites. Like the seed and the sprout, the unmanifest and the manifest. These are your two forms made known by the Vedas. For there is nothing other than you who are devoid of form. Through yoga, men who have controlled their mind are directly able to perceive you in both these forms, the seed and the sprout, the unmanifest and the manifest, as fire and pieces of wood, which is not possible by any other means. You are the air, fire, earth, ether, and water, the objects of senses, the vital airs, the 10 indriyas, the mind, the intellect, and the ego, and the deities presiding over the indriyas and the mind. That which is qualified and that which is unqualified, everything is you and you alone, O infinite one. Whatever is revealed by mind or speech is no other than you. Neither these gunas, nor the deities who preside over the gunas, nor the categories commencing from Mahattattva, nor the mind, etc., nor living beings, including the gods and human beings, all of which have a beginning and an end, are able to know you in truth, O much praised one. Thinking thus, men of good sense desist from the study of the Vedas and other scriptures. Therefore, can a man develop devotion to you, the goal of ascetics of the highest order, except through wholehearted service to you, O most worshipful one, service consisting of 6 limbs: salutation, glorification, worship in the form of offering one's actions to you, waiting on you, concentrating one's mind on your feet, and listening to your stories. Narada resumed, the Lord, who is beyond the 3 gunas and whose so many virtues were celebrated with reverence by his devotee, and who had not only controlled his anger, but was pleased, spoke to Prahrada, who was bent low. The Lord said, O noble Prahrada, may good betide you. I am pleased with you, O chief of the Asuras. Ask any boon liked by you. I am wont to gratify the desires of men. To him who is unable to propitiate me, O long-lived one, I am difficult of perception. Having beheld me, a living being has no longer any reason to bewail itself. It is for this reason alone that enlightened and pious souls who are highly fortunate and desirous of blessedness propitiate me, the Lord of all boons, with all their being. Even on being thus tempted with boons that are so alluring to the world, Prahrada, the best of the Asuras, did not hanker after them, exclusively devoted as he was to the Lord. Thus ends the 9th discourse, entitled A Eulogy of the Lord, forming part of the story of Prahrada in Book 7 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 10, the conquest of Tripura. Narada began again. Regarding all that, the offering of boons and so on, as an impediment to the practice of devotion, the child smilingly addressed the ruler of the senses as follows. Prahrada said, pray do not tempt me, attached as I am to the pleasures of sense by birth, with boons in the form of those pleasures. Afraid of attachment to them and fed up with them, I have approached you for protection, anxious to secure freedom. Eager to ascertain the characteristics of a devotee, you directed me to the pleasures of sense, the seeds of transmigration serving as so many knots to bind the heart, O Lord. Otherwise, such a thing would not be possible for you who are kind-hearted. O Jagadguru, he who seeks blessings from you is no servant, he is only a businessman. One desiring blessings for oneself from a master is no servant in the true sense of the word, and he is no master who grants gifts expecting the recognition of his mastership from his servant. I, however, am your devotee without any craving, while you are my master having no axe to grind. Unlike the interests of a king and his servant here, our interest is not governed by any other motive. If you bestow on me, O Lord, boons sought after by me, O chief of the bestower of boons, I solicit from you this boon alone, that no more desires may sprout in my heart. With the appearance of desire, the indriyas, the mind, vital energy, the body, righteousness, firmness, understanding, modesty, wealth, glory, memory, and truthfulness disappear. When a man gets rid of the desires rooted in the heart, then alone, O lotus-eyed one, he becomes qualified for divine glory. Hail to you, the almighty and high-souled Sri Hari, the inner controller, the absolute, the supreme spirit, appearing in the form of an extraordinary lion. Lord Narasingha replied, Those like you who are exclusively devoted to me never seek for me benefits in this or the next world. Nevertheless, enjoy here during this Manvantara continuously the luxuries of the lords of the Daityas. Taking pleasure in my delightful stories and enthroning in your heart me, the one Lord presiding over sacrifices and present in all creatures, worship you me, renouncing action by offering it to me. Exhausting merit by means of enjoyment and sin by meritorious actions, and casting off the body in course of time, and spreading an unsullied fame which will be sung in the celestial regions, you will attain to me, all your bonds being loosened. A man who recites this hymn addressed to me by you, thinking of you and me, as well as of this narrative, will in course of time be completely freed from the bondage of actions. Prahlada submitted, I solicit this boon from you, the ruler of bestowers of boons, O Supreme Lord, that inasmuch as my father, who was ignorant of your divine glory and whose heart was stung with indignation, spoke ill of you, who are no other than the Almighty Lord, the Jagadguru, laboring under the false notion that you had been the slayer of his brother, and bore ill will to me, a devotee of yours, he, my father, may be absolved from that sin, which is so difficult to get rid of and so difficult to cross over. Although I am sure he was purged of it the moment he was compassionately regarded with the outer corner of your eye, O lover of the afflicted. The Lord said, your father, O sinless one, was purified along with 21 past generations by the very fact that you, the sanctifier of your race, were born in his house, O pious soul. There's a footnote here that makes a good point that Hiranyakashipu was the son of Kashyapa and Diti, and Kashyapa was a mind-born son of Brahma. And so Hiranyakashipu was in the third generation from Brahma. There were only 2 past generations. So when the Lord refers to 21 past generations, he must be referring to generations of his parentage in the preceding kalpa. Wherever, the Lord goes on to say, wherever there are my devotees, perfectly tranquil, pious, and extremely noble in character, viewing all with the same eye, those tracts of land get hallowed. Kikarta, not accepted. So Kikarta was a infamously desecrated land, which was purified by devotees living in it. Those whose hankering has disappeared through devotion to me, O ruler of the Daityas, persecute none among the multitudes of living beings, high and low, by any means. Persons following your way of life in this world will become my devotees. Indeed, you will serve as a model for all my devotees. Perform you the obsequies with respect to your father, though he has already been purified in every way by the touch of my person, O beloved one. Having been blessed with a noble son, he will attain to the higher worlds. Occupy the throne of your father as the ruler of the Daityas, and fixing your mind on me, dear son, and completely devoted to me, perform your duties as directed by the exponents of the Vedas. Narada continued. Prahlada, too, did what was due to his father by way of the funeral rites, in the same way as the Lord had commanded him, O king. He was crowned by the foremost of the Brahmanas as the Maharaja of the Asuras. Finding Srihari, who was disguised as a man-lion, wearing a serene look as a token of grace, Brahma, who was surrounded by gods and others, extolled him by means of sacred hymns and submitted. Brahma said, O God of gods, supreme ruler of all, protector of created beings, my father, fortunately the wicked demon, the tormentor of the world, has been slain by you. He is the same fellow who, having secured a boon from me, was not to be killed by living beings of my creation, and proud of his strength derived from austerities and yoga, stamped out all virtues inculcated by the Vedas. Luckily enough, his son, a pious soul and an eminent devotee, though yet a child, has been delivered from you by death, by you from death. And it is good that he has now duly attained to you. This form of yours, O Lord, is capable of protecting from all dangers, even from death bent on destruction, anyone who contemplates on it, and whose mind is completely subdued. Lord Narasingha said, No more boons of this kind ought to be bestowed by you on the Asuras, O lotus-born. A boon conferred on those who are cruel by nature proves harmful, as milk given to serpents. Narada went on, having spoken thus, O Yudhishthira, and worshipped by the highest god, Brahma, Lord Srihari, who cannot be seen by all created beings, disappeared on that very spot. Then, duly worshipping the Creator, the source of the universe, these referring to Brahma and Lord Shiva, the lords of creation, the Prajapatis, and the gods, who are rays of the Lord, Prahlada made obeisance with his head bent low. After that, along with the sages headed by Kavya, who is Shukracharya, the Asura Guru, Brahma, who has his seat on a lotus, installed Prahlada as the ruler of the Daityas and the Danavas, who are the two clans of Asuras. The two main clans. There are a couple other types. Then, felicitating Prahlada and invoking the choicest blessings, and honored in return, the gods headed by Brahma returned to their abodes, O king. In this way, those two attendants of Lord Vishnu, Jaya and Vijaya, were reduced to the state of Daityas under the imprecation of the Brahmanas. Due to their hostile feeling, they were slain by Srihari present in their heart. Again, they appeared as a pair of Rakshasas, Kumbhakarna and Ravana. They were disposed of by the prowess of Sri Rama. Lying on the battlefield with their heart torn open by the arrows of Sri Rama, they shed their body, as in their previous birth, their mind fixed on him, on Sri Rama. Further, reborn as Shishupala and Dantavaktra, the son of Karusha, in this life, the two got merged in Srihari by virtue of their deep-rooted enmity, as you have seen, since Yudhishthira was there to witness Shishupala die and merge into Krishna. Becoming one with him at the last moment, even as a caterpillar gets transformed into a wasp through contemplation on the wasp. That's referring to how a caterpillar killed by a wasp is likely to reincarnate as a wasp because it's going to die with intense focus on waspness. Princes inimical to Sri Krishna got rid of whatever sin had been committed before their death because they died focused on Krishna so intensely. Even as devotees attained similarity of form with the Lord through supreme devotion characterized by a feeling of identity, so did kings such as the ruler of Chedi attain similarity of form with Srihari through contemplation on him as their enemy. All that you asked me in detail has been related to you, namely the attainment as aforesaid of similarity of form with Srihari by kings such as the son of Damaghosha, that's Shishupala, even though his enemies. The sacred story just told by me of the avatarana of Lord Sri Krishna, the supreme person, a votary of the Brahmanas, in which has been described the death of the two most ancient Daityas, the two firstborn of all the Daityas, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. The narrative of Prahlada, a great bhakta of the Lord, as well as his devotion, spiritual enlightenment, and dispassion, and as a matter of fact, the true nature of Sri Hari, who is responsible for the creation, existence, and dissolution of the universe, an account of his excellences and exploits, as well as of the great change of abodes in course of time of the higher and lower orders of creation, and the cult of the Bhagavatas, by means of which the Lord is reached. In this chronicle has been discussed at length in all bearings the topic of the spirit. Whoever, on hearing with reverence this sacred narrative, enriched with an account of the prowess of Lord Vishnu, recites it, is completely freed from the bonds of karma. Whosoever reads with a concentrated mind this story of the Leela of the most ancient person figuring as a lion, consisting of the destruction of the ruler of the Daityas, who resembled a mighty elephant, after hearing of the hallowed glory of the son of Hiranyakashipu, the foremost of virtuous souls, attains to the realm where there is no fear from any quarter. O exceedingly fortunate on earth are you, to whose residences flock from all quarters sages sanctifying the world, inasmuch as the supreme Brahman bodily stays there disguised in the form of a human being. This very Sri Krishna, who is in the room when Narada is talking, your well-known beloved friend and cousin, your very self, worthy of your adoration, obedient servant and guru, is Brahman, the realization of absolute supreme bliss diligently sought after by the great. May this Sri Krishna, the well-known protector of devotees, be gracious to us. Sri Krishna, whose essential character has not been depicted in its true colors with the help of reason, even by the source of the universe, Lord Shiva, the lotus-born, and others, and who is adored through silent meditation and inquiry, devotion and control of one's senses, and so on. He is that very Lord who spread of yore, O king, the renown of Lord Rudra, which had been marred by Maya, who possessed an endless store of conjuring tricks. The king submitted, relate in what achievement Maya marred the glory of the ruler of the universe, Lord Shiva, and the way in which it was enhanced by yonder Sri Krishna. Narada replied, utterly defeated in battle by the gods, fostered by Sri Krishna, the Asuras sought as their protector Maya, the supreme teacher of those skilled in conjuring tricks. So this is referring to Maya, not Maya Prakriti, the principle of Yoga Maya, but the Asura named Maya. Having built 3 cities of gold, silver, and steel, whose coming and going could not be easily detected, since they were flying cities that could turn invisible, and which were furnished with articles too numerous to conceive, the powerful Asura handed them over to the Asura chiefs. Remembering their old enmity, the aforesaid Asura generals set about devastating by means of these 3 flying invisible cities the 3 worlds with their rulers, O Yudhishthira, themselves remaining unperceived. Approaching Lord Shiva, the denizens of these worlds with their rulers then prayed to him, O Lord, protect us, your own people, destroyed by the demons ensconced in the 3 cities. Reassuring the Devas in the words, do not be afraid, the almighty Lord Shiva then fitted to his bow an arrow surcharged with mystic power and discharged it at the 3 cities. From that arrow, like streams of rays from the orb of the sun, issued forth fiery shafts, screened by which the cities could no longer be seen. Struck by these, all the occupants of the cities fell down dead. Maya, a great adept in conjuring tricks, fetched and put them into the nectar-like water of a well, built by himself within the cities. Touched by that nectar-like fluid endowed with the property of restoring the dead to life, they emerged with an adamantine frame and possessed of extraordinary strength, like fires in the form of lightning among the lightning tearing the clouds. Finding Lord Shiva, who bears the device of a bull on his banner, depressed in spirits because of his will having been crossed, the aforesaid Lord Vishnu then contrived a plan for drying up the immortalizing fluid. On that occasion, the creator took the form of a calf, while the aforesaid Vishnu himself actually assumed the semblance of a cow, and entering the 3 cities at midday, drank off the immortalizing fluid of that well of nectar. Though watching this, the Asuras in charge of the well did not forbid them, greatly bewildered as they were by the deluding potency of the Lord. Coming to know of this, and reflecting on the course of destiny working in that way, Mayasura, himself destitute of grief, addressed the following to the Asuras guarding the fluid, who were stricken with grief. No one in this world, be he a Deva, Asura, human being, or anyone else, is capable of setting aside what has been ordained by fate with regard to oneself or another or both. After that, by means of his own potencies in the form of righteousness, wisdom, dispassion, affluence, asceticism, learning, activity, and so on, Sri Krishna created the requisites for war for the use of the source of blessedness, Lord Shiva, a chariot, a charioteer, an ensign, horses, a bow, armor, arrows, etc. Clad in armor and mounting the chariot, the almighty Lord Shiva then took up the bow and an arrow, and fitting the arrow to the bow during the muhurta known as Abhijit, Shiva, the destroyer of the universe, burnt with it the 3 cities, which were difficult to penetrate, O Yudhishthira. Drums began to sound in heaven, while Devas, Rishis, Pitris, and the lords of Siddhas, with their hundreds of aerial vimanas crowded together in the heavens, showered heaps of flowers on the Lord Shiva, crying, may you be victorious, and hosts of Apsaras sang and danced, full of joy. Having burnt the 3 cities in this way, O king, Lord Shiva, who henceforward became known as Tripurantaka, the destroyer of the 3 cities, returned to his abode on Mount Kailasa, being glorified by Brahma and others. There are similar exploits, the accounts of which purify the 3 worlds, celebrated by rishis, of the aforesaid Sri Hari, the Jagadguru, who by his own deluding potency imitates his human world. What else shall I say? Thus ends the 10th discourse, entitled The Conquest of the Three Cities, forming part of the dialogue between Emperor Yudhishthira and the sage Narada in Book 7 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. And I'm thinking that might be a good point to stop for today. The conversation goes on between Narada and Yudhishthira for a long time on other subjects. But with that discourse, we ended the whole story we've been doing for 3 weeks now of Prahlada and Hiranyakashipu and Narasingha. So I think that's a good stopping point. Thanks for coming. I'll probably end the recording here, but I can stay on for a little bit.